Number 10. Wolverine and Native. Native was very similar to Logan in terms of her origin. She was also given claws by Weapon X after being captured by them. In the past, Logan and Native had become lovers after both escaped the Weapon X program, but after time and probably many head injuries, both mental and physical, Wolverine forgot about her. When he was eventually sent to track her down, everything came back to him, but all too late. Native and Wolverine were tracked down by Sabretooth, who had given Logan the mission in the first place. Eventually, Native was recovered by Weapon X, who also sent teams in to capture her. While in captivity once more, Weapon X discovered that due to her rapid healing factor, Native was actually pregnant with Wolverine's child. They'd kind of been together when they reconnected when he found her before Weapon X came in. While Native would be freed from Weapon X once more by Logan and escape back into the wilderness, Sabretooth would end up tracking them both down, defeating Wolverine so that he could kill Native, which he believed was in both of their best interests. Needless to say, Logan felt very different about that. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not let us know that you love when we talk about these tragic romances by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9. Human Torch and Crystal. Honestly, a relationship that a lot of folks love, but that tragically did not end so well for those involved. However, they still had a lot of happy times, so it's no surprise that this one gets revisited quite a bit in the comics. Just because they had some good times though doesn't mean that they had a smooth breakup. Crystal ended up leaving Earth because she couldn't stand the atmosphere and all the pollution. When she went home, however, she met Quicksilver and ended up breaking up with Johnny to be with Pietro after she fell in love with him. That relationship would also end up not being amazing for Crystal, but that's a story for another time. Johnny was heartbroken after the breakup, and I think for him, Crystal has always kind of been that one that got away. Number 8. Iron Man and Joanna. This relationship actually ended up being a pretty healthy one for Tony, but ultimately it was his partner wanting him to be his happiest and his best self that ended up resulting in them breaking up. Joanna Navenna was Tony's fiance. When he started fighting crime as the hero Iron Man, he didn't initially open up about it to Joanna, but eventually he did tell her. Once that was out there, Joanna actually supported his career as a superhero. Surprise! However, it also caused her to realize that she would probably never really be happy being married to a superhero, and so her and Tony ended up breaking things off. Number 7. Human Torch and Nova. I've said it before and I'll say it again. For being a ladies' man, Johnny has notoriously bad luck when it comes to his romantic life. Case in point, Frankie Ray. Frankie and Johnny initially dated, but have had a sort of on and off again relationship throughout their history. Initially, she was afraid of fire too, if you can believe that, although we'd later find out this was actually a mental block that once she was able to unblock, allowed her to regain repressed memories as well as her own suppressed flame powers that she had. She also had the power to turn herself into a living and breathing inferno. As a result, she and Johnny got close and ended up romantically entwined. However, their relationship ended in tragedy when Nova decided to sacrifice herself to save the people of Earth. She went on to become Galactus' herald, giving up her life as it was before, and taking for herself the name Nova. Number 6. Iron Man and Pepper Potts. In the MCU, Tony Stark seems to have more luck in the love department, at least when it comes to settling down with one partner. I mean, Tony does have lots of romances in the comics, but not usually with the same person, I would say. When it comes to Pepper Potts though, in the MCU, she was basically it for Tony. While they did end up being married and even having a child together, their love life was pretty short-lived, with Tony ending up giving his life to save the world once more from the threat of Thanos, who returned to threaten once again half of all life in the universe. Number 5. The Wasp and Magneto. This one happened over on Battleworld in the 1984 limited edition Marvel Superhero Secret Wars comic. Here, Magneto made Janet his prisoner, but then set her free so that he could put some moves on her, because apparently he was into her. He saw Janet as being both beautiful and brilliant, and as such possibly someone who would be reasonable enough to consider becoming his ally. I would agree, I think Janet is both beautiful and brilliant. Their talks went well, but ultimately when Magneto started talking about the electricity between them, Janet was just not feeling it. He was like, I know you feel this thing, and she was like, your eyes are nice, I guess, I don't know. She told Magneto that she just wasn't really interested, firmly responding, no, 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 when he kissed her. But then despite her protests, she basically just decided to go along with it, which is also really weird. Their intimate but brief dalliance not only felt pretty non-consensual, but then it was later revealed that Jan was only going along with it so that she could get intel and betray Magneto. Wow. And after he made a comb for her using his magnetic powers and sheer will. Number 4. Red Hood and Talia al Ghul. Well, you might be thinking, wait a minute, are either of these characters really superheroes, Amanda? I know a lot of Jason Todd fans out there who would tell you that Red Hood is one of the greatest superheroes there is. True, he does often skew more anti-hero in my opinion, but he still used his sometimes questionably moral approach to heroically help save the world and Gotham on multiple occasions, so I think we should count him. Talia, while definitely more villainous, has also sometimes been known to operate as a heroic ally to Batman as well. So yeah, she's definitely not a hero, but Jason Todd is, so it's fine. Talia actually operating as a heroic ally and love interest to Batman is actually a big part of what makes this relationship so weird actually, as Jason is kind of like an adopted son to Bruce and Talia sees Batman as her beloved, also being the mother of their child together, Damian Wayne. Granted, her and Batman's relationship honestly deserves its own point, as we've discussed before on previous weird romances list. Jason, when he was returned from the dead, had a brief thing with Talia, which in a weird way is like an adopted son getting it on with his stepmom kind of. Yikes. I know there's gonna be a lot of people in the comments. They're gonna be like, Amanda, you know there's this whole thing that's a trend that, I'm gonna be like, look, okay, this is YouTube, we gotta keep it clean for the people, for the children. Number 3. She-Hulk and the Hulk. Another weird relationship of course is the relationship between fellow superheroes and cousins, She-Hulk, Jennifer Walters, and the Hulk, Bruce Banner. Of course, these two don't get together in the 616 universe, though there was a time when the Hulk did go into kind of like a hormonal, lust-filled rage and attempted, very roughly so I might add, to get with She-Hulk. While She-Hulk managed to dodge that very disturbing and looming intimate relationship in 616, in the Old Man Logan universe of Earth 807128, it kinda became unavoidable for her. In this reality, She-Hulk and Hulk are implied to have become a couple that were the heads of an inbred family of Hulks. We also don't really know if She-Hulk was into this or not into this, and it was kind of against her will. While we don't know the fate of She-Hulk really at all, Bruce himself had become old and crazy due to the gamma radiation affecting his sanity over time. It's implied that Bruce believed that Jennifer was the only person on the planet that he would be able to mate with due to their biological superpowered similarities. Number 2. Green Arrow and Shado. Shado is the sometimes enemy and sometimes ally of Green Arrow, who in the current continuity was the lover of Oliver Queen's father, Robert. She's also the mother of Oliver's half-sister, Emiko, who ends up going on to become the apprentice of Green Arrow. However, before that continuity happened, we had the New Earth version of her character, who was similar in terms of her skills and reputation, but very different in terms of her relationships. Here, Shado was the sometimes enemy and sometimes ally of Green Arrow, who at one point when he was pursuing her, mistook him for an enemy and fatally shot an arrow through his chest. Learning that it was Green Arrow that she had wounded, she actually nursed him back to health, but during this time while he was recovering, both delirious and feverish, it's also heavily implied and later confirmed that she forced herself upon him. This was highly controversial, especially as there seemed to be no negative consequences for Shado, who later gave birth to Robert, Oliver's son, whom Green Arrow wouldn't actually find out about until after. Shado would also refuse to let Green Arrow have a say in their son's life. This whole thing is like just a lot of problems. And honestly, it was made even more weird by the fact that now and then there seemed to be like a genuine love between Shado and Green Arrow, making this relationship seem even more confusing and even more toxic. Number 1. Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. We've talked about it before on this channel, and apparently we need to talk about it again, as I saw it brought up a few times in the comments of our part 1 for this list. So here you go everyone, we're gonna talk about it. That's right, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver were a thing for a while in the comics. And no, I'm not just talking about when Elizabeth Olsen, who plays Wanda in the MCU, and Aaron Taylor Johnson, who played Pietro, were in the 2014 film Godzilla together and portrayed one another's romantic partners. This happened in canon in the comics, but in ultimately another universe. Get it? Ultimately? Get it? That's right, these two were hinted at and then fully revealed to be a couple in the Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610, despite also being siblings still in that universe. And if you're trying to give this relationship some kind of pass or some kind of benefit of the doubt, like a little one, wondering if the two perhaps, I don't know, somehow accidentally came together despite being siblings, like maybe they didn't know, this was no accident. They totally knew it was just a full-on, creepy brother-sister romance. Number 10. Dr. Doom and Victorious. The wild thing about Doom and Victorious is that this is probably the most healthy relationship Doom has actually ever had. Dr. Doom doesn't actually have a lot of luck when it comes to ladies and his relationships with them. With Victorious, the two of them were supposed to get married. However, this didn't end up working out in the end because it turned out that Victorious had actually slept with one of Dr. Doom's greatest enemies, one of the members of the Fantastic Four. No, I'm not talking about Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic. He's a married man. I am talking about the famed ladies' man of the group, the Human Torch, aka Johnny Storm. This ended up happening when Victorious and Johnny basically thought that they were not gonna make it, that they were maybe about to die. So Victorious never really meant to hurt Dr. Doom, but right before they were about to get married, she found that she had to say something about it. She just had to get it off her chest. So she was honest with Dr. Doom and told him that she had in fact slept with Johnny. This ended the wedding and of course sent Dr. Doom into a rage, which was pretty crazy, especially after he had just promised everyone that came to his wedding he wasn't gonna harm them. Victorious and Dr. Doom had never really had a super romantic relationship though. However, they've been quite close as friends and it seemed almost like romance could blossom out of just this. Great friendship, trust, and the loyalty between them, which obviously kinda ended up being somewhat broken with this revelation. With Victorious being considered one of Dr. Doom's greatest soldiers, so still pretty sad. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to show us that you love us by clicking that like button. Also, if you like all the drama that comes with superhero romances and comic book romances, I should say. Number 9. Storm and Black Panther. A lot of folks ship these two. I ship these two, and yet just because we want them to be together doesn't mean that they can be together. Black Panther and Storm have had a long romantic history, extending all the way back to when they themselves were basically teens. Later in life they came together again and the passion between them reignited, with them even getting married. For a while they were the ultimate power couple in comics, but then Avengers vs. X-Men happened and they were torn apart when Storm decided to side with the mutants. This was after Namor, as one of the Phoenix Five, had brought down a tsunami on Wakanda. Black Panther basically felt that Storm had abandoned the people of Wakanda, but Storm didn't really see it that way. While they were forced to separate and divorce, causing Storm to give up her position as Queen of Wakanda as well, these two still harbor great love for each other, so there's always hope that they could get back together, and honestly, even if they don't, we know they love each other. Come on. Come on, T'Challa, I know you love Storm, and Aurora, I know you love T'Challa. Number 8. Guy and the Human Torch. If you can't make it work with literally someone who is supposed to be your actual soulmate, then who can you make it work with? This is the question I'm forced to ask about Johnny Storm, aka the Fantastic Four member known as the Human Torch. Johnny has had a lot of challenges when it comes to his love life, and honestly, a lot of scandal. One of the most shocking revelations in the romance department for him recently was when Victorious confessed that she had actually slept with Johnny during the time he was with his current partner Kayla, aka Sky. Johnny wasn't so sure if he felt the connection to Sky at first, but she claimed that she was actually his soulmate. Just as they were starting to get closer and he was really starting to open up to her, this revelation came out, causing Sky to, of course, dump Johnny. Now granted, it should be noted that he and Victorious actually slept with each other in a scenario where basically they didn't think they'd be making it out alive. But still, it's not a great look, because you never know, you might be making it out alive, especially if this is a story that's told in a comic book. Unfortunately, I don't think comic book characters are always aware that they are in comic books, so you know how it is. Number 7. Wolverine and Mystique. I mean, clearly we knew this one wasn't going to work out very well. The relationship actually goes way back to when Mystique and Logan actually were partners. After both being captured and sentenced to death, Mystique convinced Logan to join up with her and rob a bank. They became partners and lovers, but in the end, Mystique betrayed Wolverine and left him with nothing, literally kicking him out of a moving train. Needless to say, their relationship has never really recovered, and at one point Wolverine almost killed Mystique, but instead decided to just basically leave her for dead. Spoiler alert, she didn't die, and the long-standing feud between them would continue on. Number 6. Hellcat and Hellstrom, or Hellstorm, depending on where he's at mentally. Goodness, did this one end badly. Hellcat and Hellstrom were seemingly a superhero match made in heaven, initially. But with the darkness of Hellstrom's heritage, this was not meant to last, and they quickly became a superhero match literally made in hell. Eventually, Hellstrom would give in to his darker side, turning away from Patsy. Their romance would lead to a ton of pain for her after she attempted to save Damon's life by restoring his dark soul to him. Seeing the dark soul return to him, though, without anything to protect her from that sight, took a toll on her mentally, threatening to drive her mad. She would become both mentally mentally and physically ill, as well as extremely unhappy and depressed, unable to fully recover from what she had seen. As such, when a Grim Reaper-like figure known as Death Urge presented itself to her, sensing her suffering, she begged Death Urge to actually end it. They obliged, in essence ending her life. She would return from the dead, but dang, this was a really low point for Hellcat. Also, I believe after that happened and she literally risked her own life to save Hellstrom's, he goes all evil and leaves her. Oh, rough. Number 5. Madeline Pryor and Cyclops. Madeline Pryor herself was a clone of Jean Grey, Scott's first love, created by Mr. Sinister, who is obsessed with the Summers family and with creating the perfect mutant, which Madeline was a part of that plot, but only if she had babies. So already we're not starting from a great place in terms of controversy and weirdness. There's also the fact that Scott himself only really seemed to be interested in Maddie because she so closely resembled Jean, which is also pretty weird. But it's even more strange that no one seemed to think of the two women's similarity as being suspicious and potentially the sign of a major problem, namely that Maddie was a clone of Jean. Needless to say, the relationship didn't end very well, with Jean returning from the seeming dead, having never actually been dead but just in stasis, and Scott ditching his new wife and child to join the former X-Men team, now restyled as X-Factor, the first X-Factor team in fact. Number 4. Supergirl and Comet. Yep, Supergirl once dated her horse, but I guess it was kinda okay because it turned out that he was a real boy in the end. Well, he became one. Or he became a man, really, maybe I should say, who when transformed into a human took the name of Bill Starr, Bronco Bill Starr. It turned out Comet's backstory was actually that he was once part man part horse and lived as a centaur. Even more odd, he also had a brief relationship with Lois Lane at one point, that's another thing that happened. While under his guise as Bill Starr, Comet would also work as a rodeo star and trick rider. I guess it takes being a horse to know how to really ride a horse? Something like that. Number 3. Deathstroke and Terra. I mean, this is definitely a relationship reveal that will leave you reeling, confused, and likely kinda disgusted. Technically, neither Deathstroke or Terra are really considered mainstay heroes, though both have allied themselves with the good guys in the past, and Terra was, for a time, a seeming hero with the Teen Titans. Although part of her whole reveal as an undercover baddie, as well as part of her relationship with Beast, also led us to the revelation that she and Deathstroke were together. Now, let's keep in mind that Terra is supposed to be a teenager, whereas Slade Wilson is, well, I mean, definitely an older man for sure. His hair is white, he has multiple kids. Yeah, it's just not great. Even worse, there has been added context given to us for this relationship which focuses heavily on the sexual attraction between these two. Just ick. You also have to consider the power dynamics here, with Slade being older and also kind of Terra's boss in her undercover mission. So there's also that power dynamic that is just not great. Number 2. Jean Grey and Professor X. This has to be one of the most controversial romances of our time, at least in my mind. Maybe I just read too much X-Men, so that's why this is really high up for me. Well, they didn't have a romantic relationship. They did have a relationship that had some really weird romantic undertones from pretty much day one. Professor X showed interest in Jean via his thought bubbles, but claimed he could never bring himself to let her know. Not because he was presumably much older and later established to be so, or because he was her teacher and professor at his own self-created school, but because he was the leader of the mutant team and was confined to a wheelchair. And how could he ever burden Jean with that? How could she ever accept that I'm confined to a wheelchair? It just reminds me of Scott. How could she ever accept that I can never take off my glasses? So yeah, just even on the surface, this whole thing is pretty controversial. Then of course there are all the other creepy moments from across the multiverse when it comes to the professor's feelings towards Jean. What I'm saying is, there's just more layers here than I really have time to peel back and discuss, but if you do want me to discuss them, you need to request a top 10 list on all of those creepy Professor X Jean moments, because there's a lot. Number 1. Donna Troy and Terry Long. Donna Troy was only a teenager when she met and fell in love with Terry Long, with him initially being a history professor at the college she also attended. I don't think he was ever explicitly her teacher, but that one degree of separation isn't really enough to keep the ick out of this relationship. Terry perhaps was intended to be a younger professor as well, closer in age to Donna. At one point I think it's mentioned that he's at least 29, but then there is the fact that he had tenure and was already divorced with a possibly preteen daughter from his previous marriage, Jennifer, who we later see as a teenager. The fact that Terry Long started out as a side character who also looked a lot like Marv Wolfman did at the time, and ended up somehow marrying Donna and constantly fawning over her BFF, model, and fellow teen Starfire is all pretty wild, to say the least, when you're looking back. Number 10. Rogue and Deadpool. These two are people who both have a lot of weird dates. At one point, Deadpool and Rogue had a team up that ended up in a kiss. The super strange part of it was that Rogue kissing Deadpool caused her to absorb some of his powers, which also caused her skin to temporarily resemble, well, Deadpool's skin. Not like his actual face, but just, you know how his skin's all, you know what I'm talking about. It's kinda nasty. Deadpool himself felt embarrassed about the whole thing. As much as he was into Rogue, he felt they could never be together because of all the trauma he carried with him in his mind and how he messed everything up. But Rogue just kissed him again, took a closer look inside his mind, and while at first she was somewhat taken aback admittedly, after a breath she said that after the Red Skull, having weight in her mind was basically a palate cleanser. And the two continued to smooch for a while longer. Even more awkward later, when Gambit and Rogue were back together, Gambit would actually bring up this makeout sesh, seemingly a bit jealous. What do you think makes a superhero date awkward? Do you think it's an interruption, weird pairings, or, you know, something else? Let us know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Number 9. Green Lantern and Jillian Perlman. This date got pretty awkward pretty quickly when Star Sapphire crashed it. At the time, Hal Jordan aka Green Lantern was on a date with Jillian Perlman when Star Sapphire arrived attempting to steal him away. This Star Sapphire was none other than Hal's old flame, Carol Ferris. Seeing that she was possessed by the power of Star Sapphire, Hal attempted to free Carol and succeeded, but at the cost of Jillian, who found herself next possessed by the power of the Star Sapphires, also awkwardly becoming one herself, and then calling herself Yummy. It was weird. It was weird. It was a weird time. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, you need to check out our newest channel, Most Amazing Top 10 Anime. Head on over, hit that subscribe button, make sure those bell notifications are on because you're not going to want to miss it. Number 8. Deadpool and Outlaw. In a weird turn of events, what turned into a long awkward time with Outlaw kind of ended up as like a nice, raunchy, and actually kinda sweet date, I guess, in the end. In typical Deadpool fashion, really. For those who don't know Outlaw, she's a mutant whose real name is Inez Temple. She's worked as a bodyguard for Dazzler before and is also a good friend of Deadpool's. At one point, the two even ended up married. After Deadpool called on Outlaw for some help after being shot, he sought refuge in her place, but accidentally wrecked her apartment as he was found out and, well, you know, attacked there. To make things right, by the end of the Deadpool Suicide Kings miniseries, Deadpool bought Outlaw a new pad and new furniture. That's right, he bought her a whole new apartment. That's so nice. She thanked him, and because she too cared for him and thought what he had done for her was like super sweet, decided to show her appreciation intimately. Think that's all I can really say. I'll let the panels speak for themselves. Number 7. Starfire and Nightwing. Starfire and Nightwing once had a pretty awkward moment on a date when Barbara Gordon showed up. Lots of awkward moments involving this little love triangle for sure. It was a date that Nightwing, aka Dick Grayson, only learned was awkward years later. Babs at one point showed up to Dick's place with flowers and chocolates, likely for him, only to have the door answered by a half-dressed Corey. Babs introduced herself, kind of, but she couldn't really bring herself to stay. Too sad to know that she'd already lost Nightwing. Corey never told Dick that Barbara Gordon had been the one at the door, likely sensing that Barbara, you know, needed some time and needed some space. I don't think this was Starfire trying to be mean, I think this was Starfire trying to be considerate in a way. I think that also may have been considered these two women's first meeting in canon, at least at that time anyways. Not sure if it's still considered that, but at the time, pretty sure it was. Number 6. She-Hulk and Thor. She-Hulk and Thor have dated in the past, and while not everyone was a big fan of the couple, the two have had some memorable moments together during their time serving on the Avengers, while also seeing one another. Things can get awkward when you date someone who you also work with. Especially when you're around your other teammates and coworkers. There's a lot of potential for things to get weird. In this case, we're talking about the awkwardness of the Avengers team and their reaction to the sometimes oddly intimate moments that, of course, they witnessed. Case in point, when the Avengers all decide to go hot tubbing together and She-Hulk decides to join them in the buff. Now admittedly, a lot of other people were in the buff, but She-Hulk was really in the buff, standing there in all of her green glory. Thor was very happy to see She-Hulk, as was seemingly Tony, while also feeling a little shocked, but pretty much everyone else was just kind of both like shocked and embarrassed at She-Hulk's boldness. It was an awkward but also kind of cute and funny moment overall. I like that Carol was like trying to cover up Ghost Rider's eyes. She's like, don't look.
Number 5. Batman and Talia al Ghul. While Batman and Catwoman not staying together breaks my little achy breaky heart, it's Bruce Wayne's relationship with Talia al Ghul, the daughter of Ra's al Ghul, that really takes the cake for one of his worst. Bruce and Talia acted as if they were truly in love with one another, yet nothing seemed to be genuinely that way. All Talia cared about was fulfilling her father's quest for conquering the Earth, and with some rather extreme methods. That was never going to mesh well with a superhero like Batman. While that doomed the relationship from the start, the real horrible failure of the ship came later. In order to have a mega awesome child, Talia put the Caped Crusader in a compromisable position with the use of some substances. She then proceeded to take advantage of the semi-unconscious Bruce Wayne to become pregnant. Maybe the worst part here is that she birthed the child, Damian Wayne, in secret, then polluted Damian's mind with murderous tendencies and a superiority complex, and then Talia dumped the little assassin on an unsuspecting Batman's doorstep, completely throwing Bruce's life into chaos and madness. There are different versions of this tale where Bruce may have been in full possession of his faculties, but it is shown otherwise in Batman Volume 1, number 565. Number 4. Adam and Jean Loring. Once upon a time, the Justice League superhero known as the Atom had a pretty great wife, Jean Loring. Jean and Ray have been involved before Ray was ever even a superhero, so unlike a lot of other superhero civilian relationships, they were into each other without there being some kind of weird power dynamic. Unfortunately, when Ray became a hero, things began to fall off a little bit more. Jean fell in love with Ray, but she struggled to get on board with the fact that now her life was always in danger by association, and she was constantly put in danger. It is very true. The relationship struggled because of this, and they both each had their own little entanglements. On the plus side, her cheating gave us the Sword of the Atom story, which made a lot of people fall in love with the character of the Atom. But she still cheated. He's not innocent either though. The rest of the story saw the Atom going and finding a tiny little micro-civilization in the jungle, and then he had his entanglement with their little micro-princess. Then, later on, Jean becomes some crazy powerful villain, and it's nuts. Number 3. Nightwing and Starfire. This is probably the worst of the bunch, not only because it breaks up a long-beloved relationship between Nightwing and his Teen Titans teammate, Starfire, but also because the writers of the comics retcon things about multiple characters' histories that either made no sense or completely ruined the integrity of those characters. After deciding that Barbara Gordon is the perfect fit for Nightwing over Starfire, the beginning pages of Nightwing Annual number 2 in 2007 gave us Nightwing confessing how absolutely madly in love he is with Barbara Gordon. The story then goes on to retcon their entire history, stating that they have been in love since the days when they were Batgirl and Robin, despite their weird age difference. And then, if that weren't weird enough, the book turns Dick Grayson into a cheater. Dick shows up the night before he's supposed to marry Starfire and spends the night with Babs. So he cheats on Corey, then Dick also gives Babs an invitation to his wedding after just spending the night with her. And she wasn't even aware that Dick was still planning to get married in the first place. It's messed up. Number 2. David Kane and Lady Shiva. This one barely even counts as a relationship. David Kane was one of the mentors that turned Bruce Wayne into Batman, but he didn't want that to be his legacy. Kane decided that he needs to have a child who manages to outdo Batman's training, and he needed the perfect mate to do it with. Sandra Woo-san is one of the deadliest martial artists in the world. As a kid, Sandra and her sister Carolyn trained with each other, creating a unique martial art that they mastered and would display in spars with each other, which unfortunately gained the attention attention of David Kane. Sandra always held back against her sister, and in order to unlock her true potential, David removed Carolyn from the equation and told Sandra that he would do the same to her unless she has his child. And she agreed. This did allow Sandra to unlock her true potential and to become a martial artist with almost no rival except for her own daughter, Cassandra, but that's because David, being a total sociopath, takes Cassandra the moment she was born for training. Sandra goes understandably nuts and becomes Lady Shiva, an assassin, and the two did not maintain a loving mother-father relationship after that. Number 1. Aviax and the Dinosaur. Alright, buckle up. The Wanderers are a less known group of DC space heroes from the 30th century who, in issue 12 of their first series, get called to check out a planet very similar to Earth, where the dinosaurs are dying off at a faster rate than expected thanks to a gas that was unleashed on the planet. Now, one of the members of the team, Aviax, has the ability to turn into any bird he wants, and he discovers that the reason so many dinosaurs are dying off is because the radioactive gas features a type of radiation that they have not yet evolved to be able to survive. Well, this genius comes up with an extraordinary plan. Since dinosaurs are the precursor to birds, Aviax finds that he can turn into a slightly more evolved version of one species of dinosaur. So he does, finds a good-looking dino mate, pins her down, and then, well, there's no light way to say it, he bangs a dinosaur. While Aviax did stay the night, he still ends up sneaking out on the sleeping dino the next morning. Aviax had zero qualms about seducing a dinosaur and was even excited to go back and tell his Wanderer buds all about it. The poor dinosaur, on the other hand, got left with a baby and a broken heart.
Number 10. Rogue and Magneto. I feel like Magneto has a whole string of weird romances that I could just talk about forever. Dating Magneto honestly just seems like it would be weird, intense, and kinda cool. Though I suppose the same could be said for his paramour here, Rogue. Rogue and Magneto had a brief almost romance in the main continuity when both found themselves stranded on the Savage Lands, but ultimately it was their allegiances and philosophies that kept them apart. You'd think the age difference might also potentially be a reason, as Magneto's daughter Polaris has always kinda seemed to have been depicted as being around Rogue's age, but nah, that never seems to come up. Granted, age isn't everything, but despite their great differences in terms of beliefs, there have been multiple universes where these two end up together, with a big part of the appeal likely being that Magneto, because of his powers, can actually physically touch Rogue, because his body is protected with a very tight magnetic shield. Number 9. Superman and Wonder Woman. Superman and Wonder Woman in theory sound like a great couple, but for many readers these two coming together really shook up the status quo in a way that a lot of fans weren't actually, well, a huge fan of. Superman, after all, has long been shipped with Lois Lane, and seeing a reality where the two did not come together was heartbreaking. And then of course for Wonder Woman she has Steve Trevor, although I feel like fans, myself included, weren't as heartbroken over the loss of that long-time relationship. I'm not a big Steve Trevor fan myself, so yeah. Booster Gold even expressed his own shock over Wonder Woman and Superman ending up together. For him, the couple was the end of the world. Literally. Booster Gold at one point has to travel back in the future in order to save his own future, but ends up being too late, as it turns out what he was meant to stop was Superman and Wonder Woman getting together. But at this point, they already have. Too late. Bye, Booster Gold, as he fades away. So Back to the Future. I love it. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more weird romances or controversial romances lists, I know I do, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. And if you haven't already checked out our new channel, Top 10 Nerd Elite, head on over, hit subscribe, do it, it's so good. Number 8. Starfire and Red Hood. When Starfire joined the Outlaws, it was at a really weird time in her life, and a lot of that series in general was considered to be pretty weird for her character, just in terms of her personality, her characterization, and the general goings-on. Starting right at the beginning with her flirtation and kiss with Jason Todd, aka Red Hood. Starfire had lost her memories and kissed Jason to relearn his language, having no memory of her previous and probably greatest comic book love, Dick Grayson, aka Nightwing, and therefore not really aware of the importance of the connection between Dick and Jason, who were kind of like adopted brothers in terms of the Bat family, which makes that kiss kinda weird. What's more, it was also later implied that both Starfire and Jason Todd slept with each other before she moved on to another fellow Outlaw member, Roy Harper, aka Arsenal. Which I'm not like a person that dislikes Starfire and Roy together, it's just the whole thing was kind of weird. Number 7. Marrow and Spider-Man. I feel like there have been multiple times in the comics where writers have tried to shape Marrow into something she inherently is not. And that is exactly what was going on here when she ended up in a relationship with Peter Parker. Sarah at this time didn't even really know who she was, as her mind had basically been wiped by S.H.I.E.L.D., so she literally was being rewritten as a character. Literally. What's worse is that Peter wasn't just fellow Super Spider-Man to her at this point, he was a guest lecturer and is currently a professor at her university. He also becomes aware later on that Sarah is actually Marrow, and what's worse is that her Sarah persona was built by S.H.I.E.L.D. out of implanted memories. So he also kind of knows this is going on. Granted, he didn't have a lot of time to do anything about that, but still. So the two also date briefly while Marrow isn't really fully herself. So this relationship wasn't just weird and out of place, but also felt pretty shady overall for, well, multiple reasons. At least it was oddly brief, and Marrow did end up returning to a more true version of herself by the end. Kind of reconciling both sides of herself, but yeah, Sarah was definitely a very intense opposite, I feel like, to Marrow. Number 6. Raven and Wally West. What makes that relationship that I mentioned in part 1 between Raven and Wallace West even more strange? Yep, it's time to talk about the relationship between Raven and the original Kid Flash, Wally West. Before Wally West was the Flash, he was Kid Flash, and the new Teen Titans attempted to recruit him to their team. However, Wally wasn't interested in joining up, which caused Raven to cast a spell on him to change his mind. Raven basically made Wally fall in love with her with this spell. What's even worse is that even after it was revealed that he had been manipulated by Raven, Wally still found himself unable to resist and still kind of had feelings for her. Raven herself also had feelings for Wally, but things only got weirder when her dark side was revealed to him, and she actually kind of almost ended up killing him. Needless to say, the two never formally ended up dating, but the attraction continued for a little while thereafter, as bizarre and terrifying as it was, with Wally both alternating between hating Raven and finding himself inexplicably drawn to her. Number 5. Silk and Spider-Man. The whole idea of Silk and Spider-Man as a couple is really awkward. One of the most awkward romantic times they had together was when Peter's roommate, Anna, walked in on them together while they were on the roof, getting busy. The two heroes were bit by the same radioactive spider, which initially in the canon made them obsessively lustful for one another. They literally couldn't turn it off, and, prisoners of their own pheromones, were forced to hang all over one another at any given opportunity, and even at some inopportune times too. Fortunately, this isn't a thing anymore, but for a time, it made their whole dynamic really weird. Number 4. Storm and Dr. Doom. Is there anything more awkward than when your dinner host, after wining and dining you, leans in to encase you in a chrome metal cast? No, I don't think there's anything more awkward than that. Despite the fact that their weird sort of forced dinner date was going well in issue 145 of Uncanny X-Men, Doom decided to ruin it by encasing Storm in chrome. Needless to say, this turn of events on their accidental kind of weird date thing didn't turn out too well for Storm, or for Doom either. Storm ends up furious at her predicament, and due to claustrophobia, which she suffered from at the time, created a massive storm that plagued the Earth. Fortunately, once she was out of her casing, the X-Men were able to calm her down somewhat, and disaster was averted. And Storm even let Doom mostly off the hook for that one after he apologized and claimed he wanted a fresh start with her. Number 3. Superman and Big Barda. I suppose we wouldn't technically call this a date, so much as a team up turned sour. This all went down in Action Comics issue 592 to 593, and although it isn't technically a date, it's still really weird and awkward, so I'm including it. Here we meet an old villain from Apocalypse. So old, in fact, not even Big Barda remembers him. His name is Sleaze, and he has a plan to get revenge on Darkseid, who banished him from Apocalypse, and to forge his own army. He plans to use Big Barda's Mega Rod to mind control both her and Superman into making a certain intimate kind of tape that I can't say on YouTube, but you know what I'm talking about. Superman came to her rescue, you see, but when Barda was ready to kill Sleaze for taking control of her for the last 2 days, Superman attempted to stop her, because he's Superman, and he's like, you can't just kill people, Barda, no! This caused Barda to think that Superman was somehow being controlled by Sleaze, which allowed Sleaze to actually take control of both Superman and Barda once the two turned on one another. Sleaze set them up to get all steamy together in front of the camera, but fortunately, his plan to ship the two heroes intimately for the sake of the public's enjoyment, so he can get that army and make that money, was foiled by Miracle Man, who came to rescue his wife. Number 2. Green Lantern and Arisia Robb. Maybe one of the most awkward relationships in all of comic book history. Arisia Robb was initially presented as being like a younger sister figure when it came to her and Hal Jordan's relationship. In fact, I think he even at one point calls her little sister. She was also a member of the Corps, the Green Lantern Corps, but she was also kind of like a kid too. That is until she willed herself to grow up. Why did Arisia do this? Well, because she was in love with Hal and she wanted to be with him, but he refused her advances because he felt it would be wrong. After all, she was a kid, and at the time she was a teenager. He was like, this is not okay. However, his tune changed once Arisia aged herself up. Once Arisia was, all grown up, the two ended up dating, and eventually they would even live together, if you can believe that. Looking back on their relationship and date now, the awkwardness and just plain wrongness feels impossible to avoid in the context of the modern day. Number 1. Supergirl and Comet. Supergirl once dated a horse. Yep. Her own horse, Comet. Comet, however, wasn't always a horse and was once a minotaur that desired to be human. However, while Circe attempted to make his wish come true, she was tricked, and instead the centaur named Byron was turned into a full horse instead of becoming a full human. Which is just such a Circe thing to happen, isn't it? Even though it was a mistake. Circe felt bad and gave Byron superpowers and immortality as a white horse to kind of make up for the whole turning him into a horse as opposed to a human. As a horse, Comet also became a friend and ally to Supergirl, but little did she know he was not just a horse, but a minotaur trapped in the body of a horse who wanted to be human, and who also was in love with her. When Comet was temporarily transformed into a human, rather than reveal to Supergirl his true identity when she came looking for her horse companion, he decided to take up the name of Bronco Bill Star, keep the truth of his identity a secret from her, and woo her instead. Number 10. Emma Frost and Cyclops. Don't get me wrong, I like this relationship overall in retrospect, but as this unfolded, it was pretty controversial. Not even just for fans reading along as this developed, but also in the Marvel Universe. Scott and Emma's relationship started as an affair, with him being with Jean at the time. Jean and Scott, however, did end up parting ways after Jean learned that Scott was having a psychic affair with Emma. Even weirder was that sometimes in their sexy mind affair, Emma would basically cosplay as Jean, making herself look just like her for Scott. It was all pretty crazy. Emma and Jean would have a pretty intense fight regarding this whole affair, and even today, having buried the hatchet now, still have their moments of sassy animosity towards one another, but then they also have their moments of supporting one another. It's pretty cute. Number 9. Aunt May and J. Jonah Jameson. This one was more shocking, I suppose, than controversial, but still. There is nothing wrong with Aunt May moving on and finding love, of course, but I don't think that many of us ever suspected that when she did move on, it would be with JJ. And even more shocking was when Peter at one point walked in on them together when they were in bed. Yikes. Also, what a way to find out that your Aunt May is dating someone. That's a way to find that out. And you might be thinking, are either of these characters really heroes, Amanda? Should they really be on this list? Aunt May is definitely one of Peter's heroes, and in the alternate reality of Earth 3123 is a literal hero, with her taking Peter's place as a spider-like super who goes by the name of Spider-Man. And so for that reason, I think we can count Aunt May today. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more controversial superhero romances, I have so many that I want to talk to you about. So please be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Roy Harper and Donna Troy and The Flash. I mean, this was just a really weird time for Wally, and that is likely a big part of what made this love triangle romance so strange. What happened here was that Donna Troy and Wally West ended up together after the main continuity was reset. Wally knew of his past life with Linda and his kids, but his kids were now seemingly gone, with Linda not remembering who he was or their marriage or relationship from the prior continuity. Donna was there to support Wally through this, and the two ended up together. Roy, however, had a crush on Donna and ended up heartbroken as a result. Ouch. And then shortly after, Wally West lost control during Heroes in Crisis, and coincidentally, not even intentionally apparently, killed Roy Harper, among others. It's just a pretty strange scenario, I guess, and a really strange coincidence? Number 7. Madeline Pryor and Havoc. While Maddie is definitely more of a villain and Havoc was once a villain himself, currently in the comics, Havoc is a hero. So we're gonna count him as a hero for this list. Because yeah, and he's trying really hard. Oh, Havoc. Everyone go read Hellions, go do it right now. Besides, he's also been a hero in the past as well. So as I said, he is the hero for this relationship point. What was controversial about these two? Well, just about everything. Madeline Pryor was initially married to Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, Alex's brother. Madeline was also still married, I believe, when this romance began, and then she ended up turning Havoc into kind of her thrall and her Goblin King, or the very least her goblin consort. Remember those matching outfits? Oof, those themselves could be considered controversial to some, I think. Although I definitely love both of those outfits. I love that Havoc just had like a matching one to Madeline Pryor's like goblin queen outfit. It's pretty great. Number 6, Raven and Wallace West. This is a pretty weird one, especially considering Wally West and Raven's history, which we're not going to talk about in this list, but maybe if we do a part 2, I'll talk about that almost romance. Raven and Wallace West were in a romantic relationship, which is pretty weird if you consider the age difference and also just the different stages of life that they're both in. While this relationship seems to have disappeared in current continuity, it is interesting to note that Wallace West is now a sort of student at Teen Titans Academy, while also being a member of one of the teams of the Teen Titans and a teenager. And Raven is back to being her all-around, normal, youthful, though no longer teenage self, with her being one of the faculty at the academy. That means that unless we make some important adjustments for either hero in terms of their ages, their relationship, when it did happen, was pretty controversial to say the least. I think there was supposed to be kind of an age tweak when that relationship happened, but yeah, if you don't know that, you'd just be like, what's going on? Raven's dating a teenager. What's happening? Number 5, Rose and Wolverine. Definitely a tragic love story if I have ever heard one. Initially, Logan, or James Howlett as he was known then, and little Rose grew up together. She was a child brought in from the town to ask as a playmate for the young lord-to-be. While James was fond of Rose, so was his half-brother Dog. But fortunately, Rose escaped Dog's advances. After almost his whole family was tragically killed when the groundskeeper, Dog's father, rose up and attempted to take James's mother with him, with the trauma of the night causing James's mutant powers to manifest, James and Rose ran away. While Logan had feelings for Rose, he never really confessed them, and eventually she was engaged to another man in the town that they'd come to settle in. Tragically, Rose never got to be with the man she was betrothed to, or really even know about Logan's true feelings, as when Dog came looking for them, Logan accidentally killed her when she got in the middle of a fight between him and Dog. And tragically, Logan was the one to impale her, which is pretty sad. Number 4, Iron Man and Kathy Dare. Jeez, this was an awful romance. Initially, these two started seeing each other pretty casually, and for a while, they were happy. However, Kathy simply could not get over her jealousy problem. Every woman that Tony Stark was around basically made her jealous, even those to whom he had no romantic connection or really interest in. The jealousy drove Kathy mad. So mad, in fact, that she shot Tony Stark point blank. He would actually live, but Kathy would not be made aware as Tony faked his death, leaving her to believe that she was actually the one responsible and that she had actually killed Tony Stark. Unable to move through her grief and disgust over what she had done to the man she loved, Kathy ended up taking her own life. Meanwhile, Tony would recover and eventually resume the mantle of Iron Man and reveal to everyone, that he wasn't dead. I wonder how he coped with the grief of Kathy's death, considering him faking his own death kind of ended up leading to her actual death. Although clearly Kathy was not in a good place even prior to her shooting Stark, because I feel like if you have that much jealousy issues, something's going on. Also, if you're jealous in general, it usually means something's going on. If you're feeling jealous, you should look inside yourself. That's what I think. Number 3, Wolverine and Silver Fox. Speaking of tragic love stories involving Wolverine, there are of course a ton of them in the comics. One that constantly seems to return to Wolverine and plague him is the story of him and Silver Fox. Silver Fox was a member of the Blackfoot Native American tribe up in Canada. She grew up in the Yukon, which is also where she met Logan, who had settled there. He ended up being accepted by her tribe, and he began to court Silver Fox. The two had a brief but lovely relationship that ended in violence when Sabretooth came to pay Wolverine one of his infamous birthday visits. He found Silver Fox at home alone, tormented her, and killed her. When Wolverine found her, he sought out Sabretooth, and the two fought, with Wolverine intending to kill Victor, but ultimately failing to do so. And then he also got brainwashed and It just gets worse. Number 2, Scarlet Witch and Vision. When it comes to Scarlet Witch and Vision, they have a romance that has often been celebrated throughout comic book history and also in the MCU. However, when you actually boil down their relationship, what it's based on, what it's like, it's kinda messed up. Thinking about the fact that Vision's brain patterns are actually based off of Wonder Man, who later ends up being Wanda's partner in the comics, is kinda weird and kinda wild, and honestly, it's a little bit unsettling. While we can't deny that there is definitely a ton of love between both Scarlet Witch and Vision, and even I do hold out for them too to get back together at some point, because they're honestly pretty cute together at the end of the day, even if they are dysfunctional in some ways. This relationship did not end up with a good fairy tale ending. Vision and Scarlet Witch ended up getting married. They moved in together, had a cute little suburban life, team up comic, but by the end of it, they also had some kids somehow, which doesn't really make sense, of course, because Vision is an android. He can't have kids. So how did that happen? Well, apparently it happened because Wanda was able to use a piece of Mephisto's soul to create her children, and she probably kind of did this subconsciously because she desperately wanted kids. This would lead to Wanda becoming mentally unstable once her kids were lost to her, and would also end up leading to one of the most devastating moments in Avengers history. You know what I'm talking about? Avengers Disassembled. Vision during this relationship would also end up kind of losing all of his memories, all of his emotions, and Wanda had to deal with all of that while they were together. Needless to say, they weren't able to stay together because Vision wasn't really the same person, and this only exacerbated a lot of Wanda's mental issues that she was dealing with even prior to her losing her kids. Because that all happened, I believe, before her kids were even lost, so yeah, it's a lot. The relationship would also have a detrimental effect on Vision, who ultimately would, in a way, make his own family because he couldn't be with Wanda. He decided to create the perfect family. However, this didn't end well for him either, because although he had created a family and they did have some good times together, ultimately he also kind of inadvertently destroyed them. So all in all, this relationship just ended in a lot of tragedy on both sides. I mean, not all of the family he made is gone, but almost all of them are gone, so pretty tragic. Number 1, Virginia and Vision. Virginia and Vision, oh boy. So if you haven't read Tom King's Vision series, by the way, you need to do that. This relationship is obviously coming from the one I was just talking about, which is Vision's family that he makes. If the idea of a relationship that Vision sort of created and what that would be about interests you at all, I would definitely recommend checking out this series. Sure, it does end in tragedy, but what a wild ride it is getting to that point. So even though this might feel like a spoiler, really it's the journey that makes the Vision series and his relationships with his family members and their relationships with one another so interesting. Virginia is an android who was made by Vision to be his wife. However, with her mind quickly becoming more and more paranoid and unstable as she attempted to adjust to normal family living, with Vision and his wife also having 2 children created from a combination of their brainwaves, a son and a daughter, and ending up also getting a dog, let me just say that this romance really does not end well. I could explain more as to why and what happens with Virginia and really get into it with you, but I'll keep this one a little bit more mysterious for those of you who have yet to pick up this series and want to give it a read. Once again, I do highly recommend that you read it.
Kicking off at number 10, it's Donna Troy and Terry Long. As the mirror duplicate sister of the Wonder Woman, Donna Troy was admired by many of her male teammates and a few teenage civilians to boot. So the question of why the 19-year-old actually married a 29-year-old divorced college professor is one that may never have a satisfying answer. The fact that he was divorced and 10 years older than her can be passable, I guess, but then we add on the fact that he was a complete creep with a perm who would flirt with not only the other female titans, but even his own students, and it just makes it ever so worse. Even with all that though, Terry still ended up with full custody of their kid after filing a restraining order and claiming Donna was too dangerous to be their kid's mom. At least she wasn't the one who complained about not getting help to write a paper because her partner was fighting demons and aliens. Number 9, Kyle Rayner and Alex DeWitt. This isn't so much a failed relationship as it is a completely wasted one. Green Lantern Kyle Rayner came home one day after a long day of superheroing in Green Lantern issue number 54 from 1994 to find his then girlfriend, photojournalist Alexandra DeWitt, had been very savagely stripped of her life at the hands of the villain known as Major Force. But not only did Major Force take Alexandra's life, for seemingly no reason, he also stuffed her into the couple's shared fridge. It was incredibly brutal, and in terms of storytelling, it only served to give Kyle, the male antagonist of the story, the motivation to reach new heights comics as a hero. Meanwhile, her character, who was genuinely likable and had enough going on in the comic to stand on her own, was gone forever. This act of removing female love interests to spur on male protagonists was a trope in not only comics, but media in general, which practically never happened in the reverse. After this comic came out though, the trope was finally given a name, fridging, or women in refrigerators, and it changed the way female characters were written in comics for the most part, so I guess there is kind of a silver lining to this story. Number 8. Nightwing and Tarantula. Dick Grayson, being the former ward of a guy who has notoriously bad relationships, follows suit with most of his relationships ending in some undeserved heartbreak and some serious PTSD. Take Tarantula for example. Tarantula was a villain who was trying to reform as a vigilante like Nightwing, but unfortunately, Tarantula was far too toxic. She enjoyed being a villain way too much and usually ignored everything Nightwing taught her. Well, in Nightwing 1996 number 93 from 2004, after a slog of a fight that moved out onto a fire escape, Nightwing had the Bloodhaven villain Blockbuster on the ropes when Tarantula showed up. Shocking everyone, Nightwing leaves his morals at the door. Realizing Blockbuster will never stop and that his girlfriend is not reforming, he steps aside to allow Tarantula to end the villain's life. He then has a complete panic attack, and she took that as the go-ahead to keep him down with substances and then get it on. Needless to say, they did not stay together for very long after that, but they did stay together, and that's weird. Number 7. Batman and Catwoman. The wedding of Batman and Catwoman was a big freaking deal. It was teased at and built up for a long time. Fans were genuinely excited to see it happen and to see what could come next after the fact. Like a kid of Selena Kyle and Bruce Wayne, that would be awesome. But sadly, the wedding that was so coveted never came to be. Batman issue 50 came and went, and following suit, so did Catwoman. Came and went from Bruce Wayne's life, literally leaving the groom at the altar. Batman was marrying Catwoman so he could literally just be happy. And after some convincing words from criminals like the Joker and her friend Holly, Catwoman believed that if Bruce Wayne was happy, then Batman couldn't exist. Which, 1, that is depressing, but 2, both the Joker and Holly, alongside Riddler, Gotham Girl, Flashpoint, Thomas Wayne Batman, and other villains, were working for Bane, who was manipulating events in order to break Batman emotionally and give rise to the City of Bane event. Well, it certainly sent Batman down a path of absolute despair. He became much more drastic with his fighting of criminals, particularly an innocent Mr. Freeze, and he even donned a less advanced version of his Batsuit so that he would take more of a beating. Number 6. Deathstroke and Terra. Deathstroke has committed more than his fair share of bad deeds over the years, but one of the worst crimes he's committed has to be his romance with the teenage superhero Terra. The Judas Contract is one of the most iconic Teen Titans and Deathstroke storylines, where readers learn that Terra was not only a villain sent to spy on the heroes, but was also dating and having intimate interactions with the Titans' arch-enemy, Deathstroke. All of us know that this relationship was actually a full-grown adult using someone far too young for his own villainous intentions. Yet, writer Marv Wolfman has explained his intention to reveal Terra as the true villain and the one in control of the relationship. But we aren't going to pretend that that's acceptable. Terra, being brainwashed, dismantled the team from the inside out, and it completely wrecked the Titans. She and Deathstroke were eventually foiled by intervention from Deathstroke's son, Jericho, and Dick Grayson in his first outing as Nightwing, with Terra passing away at the story's conclusion, having brought down a building around herself in a blind rampage. DC chose to retcon this relationship in order to dissolve the creepy factor, which was definitely a smart move, but it's still uncomfortable nonetheless.
Number 5. Donna Troy and Terry Long. While She-Hulk and Thor might seem like a super logical pairing, how about Donna Troy and Terry Long? I feel like one of the most illogical things that we've ever done. They were definitely objectively odd together, I would say, and yet they didn't only date. They got full-on married. Despite the fact that Terry was seemingly years older than Donna, constantly flirting with her friend and teammate Starfire, and used to be Donna's professor. Yeah, Can you spell problematic? I'm pretty sure you can just spell it with Donna Troy and Terry Long. Or I mean, I guess Donna Long as she became for a while. I think she kept her name though. Donna Long would be a terrible name, would it not? The relationship would actually go on for quite some time, but eventually even DC realized some of the problems with these two being together. Terry and Donna would have a child together, but later separate, before Terry and their son Robert, as well as his daughter from a previous marriage, Jennifer, were actually killed in a car crash. The really bizarre part was that Terry actually was the one who actively sought to separate from Donna, deeming her too dangerous to be around, and even got a restraining order against her, which is weird. You'd think it would be the other way, but no, Terry was the one that was like, we definitely need to get divorced and I definitely need a restraining order because you dangerous, because you're superhero life. If you're worried about danger, I feel like don't marry a superhero. Just a suggestion to people. Number 4, Miss Marvel and Vision. This one is mainly awkward because it's an awkward pairing. To be clear, when we're talking about Miss Marvel here, we're actually not talking about Kamala Khan, but instead we're talking about Carol Danvers, back when she was known by that hero mantle, Miss Marvel, before she gave the name to Kamala. While Vision is often associated with Scarlet Witch in regards to romance, after the two went their separate ways but were both Avengers, Viz decided to try his hand at dating himself. Wanda at this point had moved on with Wonder Man, and when Vision asked Carol out, I think everyone, readers included, were a little shocked. Carol also was surprised, but after making sure it was fine with Wanda, agreed to the date. The date they went on seemed to be going quite well, but it was interrupted by an emergency call to action, and despite it being a seemingly successful date where both of them had fun, the two never really dated again, as far as we know. If they did date, I think it was off panel because I can't think of any other ones. It's awkward when you have a really good date and then you're like, let's just never see each other again. This was fun, but like, I'll see you on the team, that's it. I don't know, maybe Carol isn't into like android beings or something. Maybe that's what she realized on that date. She was like, I like Viz, but like as a friend. Number 3, Ice and Green Lantern. So initially, Ice and Green Lantern got along pretty well, but then everything changed. Namely, Guy Gardner returned to the man that he'd always been, which meant that Ice didn't actually like him so much anymore. You see, Fire and Ice joined the Justice League of America after Guy Gardner, aka Green Lantern, had suffered from some head trauma that actually caused him to become a lot more cool, calm, collected. He was sweet, he was kind, and that's how the two always knew him. Eventually, however, his true personality would return and take over, and that was when he tricked Ice into going out on a date with him. Kinda like challenging her to do it basically, and she was like, fine, I'll go out on a date with you, we'll see. We'll see if you're actually nice or not. Where did Guy take her, by the way? A theater that shows adult films. Yeah, I think you can imagine how it went. Not so good. Ice was like, what is this? You really are a jerk, Guy Gardner. He's like, well, I am who I am. Gotta give Guy that, at least he is who he is and he doesn't really apologize for it. For better or for worse. Number 2, Nightcrawler and Amanda Sefton. Although we now know her as Amanda Sefton more commonly, originally Amanda was known as Jemaine Zardos. As a Nightcrawler fan, you may already know the significance of this name, but for those who don't, allow me to explain. Nightcrawler is the son of Azazel and Mystique, but they both dipped pretty early on in his life. Abandoned, Nightcrawler was found and taken in by Margali, a sorceress. Margali had 2 children when she took in Kurt, one of which was Jemaine. That's right, Margali Zardos is Nightcrawler's adopted mother, making Jemaine his adopted sister. Oh boy. Eventually, Kurt Zardos left his family, became Kurt Wagner, and joined the X-Men. But Jemaine was curious about his leaving and his potential involvement in their brother's death, so she decided to change her name to Amanda Sefton, followed him, and then surprisingly ended up dating him? The really awkward part is that after Kurt kind of figured out that Amanda was actually Jemaine, he still decided to keep dating her. I mean, they wouldn't stay together forever, but it's weird, right? Number 1, Batman and Talia al Ghul. Batman and Talia al Ghul. Some people love them, some people think they're toxic together, some people hate them. I mean, even the moments when I do love them, I personally still think they're pretty toxic together, so yeah. I mean, granted, a lot of superhero relationships are somewhat toxic. Let's just acknowledge that. I also consider these two to be toxic even without considering or, focusing on the fact that Talia in canon forced herself on Bruce, and basically that's how she got and we got Damian Wayne. Yeesh. These two have had plenty of awkward dates, and let's not forget the time they were basically married in secret as well, which also is just a whole kind of weird, it's just weird. That was a whole weird thing. Really, everything is weird with Batman and Talia. Perhaps that's also part of the reason why people love them together though too? I don't know. I don't really see it. I'm personally very pro Batman and Catwoman. Batman and Talia, I'm like, I think there's too many things that have happened where we just need to be like, no, don't do it. Number 10, Magma and Mephisto. It's weird that this one is one of the least awkward dates that's on this list, but really, it is. Magma and Mephisto dated after the New Mutants accidentally got transported to a Hell dimension instead of the more specific Hela's Hell. As such, Mephisto made a deal to transport them out of his Hell dimension where they ended up and into Hell with one L in exchange for a date with Amara, aka Magma. Amara accepted the terms and the New Mutants were successfully transported to their destination. Later, the date with Mephisto started off awkwardly as he took her to the third circle of Hell and really tried too hard to romance her. However, after Amara called him out on this and Mephisto revealed his sincere intention to simply have a nice, normal evening and be treated as a normal person, the two went out to a restaurant on Earth. Mephisto even got a good night's kiss from Magma at the end of the night, who later agreed to see him again. Number 9, Batman and Wonder Woman. Batman and Wonder Woman have ended up together in the comics before, but they also have lived infinite lives together through Wonder Woman's dreams. When they shared a kiss in the main continuity, it left the two of them wondering if they should be together or not. Before they ultimately made the choice on whether or not to take the plunge, Wonder Woman decided to hook herself up to Martian Manhunter's transconsciousness articulator, which showed her what kind of potential their life together might hold, at least as far as her own mind saw in regards to possibilities. Although a lot of it was sweet, there was also a lot of dark moments that Wonder Woman saw. In the end, Batman came to her to talk as she woke up and finished her time in the transconsciousness articulator. The two awkwardly then agreed to stay friends, despite it being obvious that they both perhaps are interested in more. Awkward. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, please head on over to our newest channel, Top 10 Anime, and check them out where we're going to be talking about cool anime stuff and manga, all the good things. La la la. Number 8, Spider-Man and Captain Marvel. Spider-Man and Captain Marvel may have had the most traditionally awkward date in Marvel history. Carol and Spider-Man had flirted a bit during their time working together, but at one point Spider-Man basically made a deal with Carol to help her in exchange for a date. He was kind of joking, but she ended up accepting, and so they went on this date. The date was extremely awkward just because both Peter and Carol were putting on personas the whole time, going out to a fancy place when they kind of just both wanted to chill and like grab some fast food. Fortunately, some crime intervened and they were able to round out the end of the night with chili dogs on a rooftop after, dealing with the crime, revealing that for both of them this was really the ideal date. Number 7, Squirrel Girl and Wolverine. Although we never saw the dating on panel, in my mind I feel like it would be super awkward. So based on my own headcanon, my own imaginings of the implied relationship between these two, I'm including them together as a point. Why is the relationship between them weird for me? Well, aside from the age difference, which many of you have dismissed here on Nerd in the comments whenever I talk about Wolverine, which is fair enough, bub. At this point, it is very hard for Wolverine, at least while on Earth, to find someone to date who is close to his own age, because yeah, he ancient. It's just weird though because these two are so very different. Doreen is like a ray of sunshine with a big glass of friendship on the side, and Wolverine is like an old grumpy loner. However, maybe Doreen was able to bring out a side of Logan that we don't normally see. Even if this was the case though, those dates still sound like they would be awkward as heck to me to read, though I kinda really want to read them. It was apparently clarified in the letters page of Unbeatable Squirrel Girl issue number 2 that Wolverine and Squirrel Girl never had a romantic relationship, but based on how they were written together in New Avengers and Wolverine's potential feelings for her as revealed in his own series, I'm not sure I buy it. Also, it's different writers, so every writer can have their own canon about a character, but doesn't always stay true when somebody else is writing. You know what I mean? Number 6, Stargirl and Shazam. Stargirl and Shazam dated for a time, and although it wasn't awkward necessarily for them, well, it did get awkward for them, but it wasn't awkward for them to start. It was awkward for heroes who knew them. But who also didn't know the secret identity of Shazam. You see, Shazam is actually Billy Batson, who is like a teenage kid, like Stargirl, but when he transforms, he appears as the grown man, Shazam. Forced to choose between Stargirl or his secret identity, Billy ultimately chose to keep the truth that he was a child in a man's body as Shazam a secret, which ultimately cost Stargirl and Shazam their relationship, as it was too awkward for everyone else to be talking about the apparent scandal that was their relationship, because, you know, Shazam's an adult and Stargirl's a teenager, so people were like, that's not good. Number 5. Wolverine and Jean Grey. Wolverine has had one of the most tragic romantic histories of any character in the comics. Usually the women he loves end up dead, and Jean is no exception. While she is super powerful, this hasn't stopped her from dying multiple times, and even when she is alive, she is often out of reach for Wolverine. The two share an admiration and respect for one another, but it's also been made abundantly clear throughout their history that they will never really get to end up with one another. Wolverine either is left struggling with the unrequited nature of his love for Jean, or is left to bury her. However, I will say that while this love story has failed multiple times over, there is a glimmer of hope for Logan and Jeannie. During the Krakoan era, they lived on the blue area of the moon in the summer house together, where Jean's room was in the middle between two adjoining rooms, one belonging to Scott Summers, Cyclops, often her husband in the comics, and one belonging to Wolverine himself, her often forbidden love, who also lived there with the Summers family. So there might be hope for them yet. If not as a couple, then maybe as a throuple? Number 4. Mystique and Azazel. While the love affair might have been rewarding in its own way for Mystique and Azazel at the time, the fact remains that it resulted in disaster for baby Nightcrawler, their son. And also, actually, I would say Mystique was pretty broken up by this one. Mystique also ended up being literally chased by an angry mob because of the appearance of her newborn babe, who like her was a mutant and who like her was also blue. Mystique was married at the time that she and Azazel got together. Tragically for her as well, Azazel left her and basically said to just like raise their child as if it was her husband's and not his. Her husband was not a blue mutant, but instead the human man, Christian Wagner. So of course, when she gave birth to a blue baby boy, also losing control of her shapeshifting abilities while giving birth, everyone freaked the heck out. Eventually, she and her baby would be chased out of the town, forcing Mystique to become separated from little Nightcrawler, who, thank goodness, would make it and ended up being taken in by Margali Zardos and the traveling circus that she worked for. Number 3. Mystique and Destiny. While this may be one of my favorite relationships in all of comics, the romance between Destiny and Mystique is filled with tragedy. In fact, the fact that Mystique was ever with Azazel might be one of the most tragic parts of this relationship. When Chris Claremont wrote these two women in the 80s, his intention was always for them to be lovers, and even more interesting, he actually wanted Mystique to be Nightcrawler's father, with Destiny being her mother, with Mystique basically shapeshifting into a man and laying with Destiny, resulting in the conception of Nightcrawler. Pretty wild idea for the time. However, the Comics Code Authority banned queer relationships in comics, so instead their romantic relationship would kind of be forced to remain subtextual for much of their early history. Mystique would instead be shipped with Azazel to explain Nightcrawler's biological origin, and eventually Destiny would die in the comics in 1989, with her death breaking Mystique's heart. So all in all, there's a lot of tragedy there, but not anymore, now they get to be together, woo! Number 2. Wolverine and Mariko. Look, Wolverine has just had too many tragic love stories for me to not talk about more of them. And not to mention one of his greatest romantic losses, the death of Mariko Yashida, which he was forced to participate in after Mariko was poisoned. Wolverine and Mariko initially had a very successful and forbidden romance. Mariko was initially betrothed to a brutal man who mistreated her as the daughter of the head of Clan Yashida, a criminal organization. However, after her father's death, she is able to become the head of that organization and make some changes. She initially was going to marry Wolverine, but their wedding got called off after Mariko decided she wanted to cleanse Clan Yashida of its criminal ties. It was during this time that an assassination attempt was made on her life and succeeded, with her being poisoned and begging Wolverine to end it so that she wouldn't suffer from the poison. Number 1. Hawkeye and Moonstone. This relationship almost ended with the end of the world. Moonstone is Carla Sofin, a psychiatrist who enjoyed using her knowledge of psychology to torment and manipulate her patients. She would end up acquiring acquiring a powerful stone known as the Moonstone, which gave her both her name and her powers as a villain. However, she also was on the Thunderbolts team, initially posing as heroes but really villains under Baron Zemo. But after being exposed, she actually decided to stick around and attempt to become a hero for real under the leadership of Hawkeye. The two ended up in a romantic relationship, but when Project Liberator went wrong, overloading Karla with apocalyptic power, Hawkeye was forced to defeat her to save the Earth, ending their relationship. Now, he didn't want to have to use force against Karla, but simply she was overwhelmed at the time and she just could not be swayed by his words, so Hawkeye had no choice. All in all, I feel like they both kind of feel like they failed in that relationship.